Welcome to today's AI news. We're excited to introduce AlphaGenome, a groundbreaking AI model from Google DeepMind that decodes the human genome's hidden regulatory elements.
Imagine a place where the very fabric of human history is woven into the DNA of its people. A place where ancient populations, long thought to be lost, are alive and well, hidden within the genetic code of the present. Ethiopia. Here, genetic time capsules hold the key to unlocking mysteries that challenge everything we thought we knew about human evolution. Those populations, unknown encounters, and a history that defies logic. Ethiopia's DNA doesn't just tell the past, it holds the future of humanity itself. What we discover next may change everything.
We know that there is digital code, right, embedded in the DNA molecule. It points to a designing intelligence.
In 2012, a groundbreaking genetic study completely upended our understanding of human history. Conducted by scientists examining Ethiopian DNA, the study revealed something extraordinary. Evidence emerged suggesting that Ethiopia, rather than being isolated from the rest of Africa, had become a genetic crossroads, a place where populations, once separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, converged. It became clear that Ethiopia acted as a genetic time capsule, preserving traces of ancient encounters between humans long forgotten by history. What's more surprising is not just what was found, but what had been hiding in plain sight all along. Ethiopian DNA doesn't just narrate the story of Africa, it rewrites the entire saga of humankind. For instance, every human outside Africa carries about 2% Neanderthal DNA. This genetic signature is the result of a long ago encounter, approximately 60,000 years ago, between early modern humans and Neanderthals. However, Ethiopians carry something different, something much rarer. While Europeans preserved evidence of their ancient meeting with Neanderthals and Asians with Denisovans, Ethiopians have genetic memories of a ghost population, an ancient human group that left no bones or tools, only genetic echoes. These ghost populations left their mark in the DNA of Ethiopians, even though their physical traces remain elusive to archaeology. This discovery not only challenges our understanding of human prehistory, but also suggests that Ethiopia was not merely the cradle of humanity, it was a place of ongoing human activity. It wasn't just the birthplace of human species, it was, and still is, a place where humanity returned repeatedly over the millennia. These multiple waves of human migrations combined in Ethiopia, giving rise to a genetic diversity that exists nowhere else on Earth. Ethiopia's role as a focal point of human evolution is perhaps best illustrated by the famous fossil discovery of Lucy, the Australopithecus afarensis, who lived around 3.2 million years ago. Lucy's discovery in Ethiopia's Afar Depression was a pivotal moment for the scientific community. But Lucy was just one part of the much bigger picture. In 2022, a further groundbreaking discovery was made in Ethiopia that forever changed the course of our understanding of human evolution. Scientists studying the genetics of the Afar people, descendants of Lucy's homelands, found genetic sequences that diverged from other humans around 300,000 years ago. This was 1,000 years before modern humans were supposed to have emerged. The Afar people carry humanity's oldest Y chromosome lineage, known as A0, a lineage so ancient it predates the common ancestor of all living humans. Far from being a simple evolutionary offshoot, the Afar people represent a living archive of a parallel branch of humanity, an alternative genetic history that survived in isolation. But it doesn't stop there. In 2019, Dr. Pontus Skoglund, a computational biologist, uncovered something so strange in Ethiopian genomes that he had to rerun his analysis 5 times. It was found that Ethiopians carry 4 to 7% of their ancestry from a ghost population, an ancient human group that split off from our own lineage around 500,000 years ago. This group, whose remains have never been found, mysteriously reappeared in Ethiopia and interbred with modern humans. No fossils of this population exist, no archaeological traces remain, and yet its genetic legacy persists in the Ethiopian people to this day. The Homo Kibish fossils, dating back 195,000 years, provided further evidence that modern humans evolved in Ethiopia. These fossils were once thought to be the earliest human remains in Africa, but when scientists compared their DNA to that of modern Ethiopians, they found something unsettling. Modern Ethiopians are not only descendants of these ancient remains, they are descended from Homo plus something else. Modern Ethiopians carry traces of multiple diverse ancestral populations, suggesting that the process of human evolution was far more complex than previously imagined. Dr. Sarah Tishkov's team, analyzing genetic diversity within Ethiopia, made a startling discovery. They found that Ethiopians possess far more genetic diversity than entire continents. In fact, a single Ethiopian village can hold more genetic variation than all of Europe. This diversity follows a curious pattern, as if multiple human species and populations had converged on Ethiopia over hundreds of thousands of years, each leaving behind a genetic imprint. But why Ethiopia? The answer could lie in Ethiopia's connection to Denisovans. In 2018, researchers found Denisovan DNA in African populations for the first time, and remarkably, this DNA was found in Ethiopia. Denisovans, as we know, are typically associated with Asia. So how did their genetic traces end up in Africa? The only plausible explanation is that an unknown branch of Denisovans once lived in Africa, and their descendants still survive today in Ethiopian bloodline. Further deepening the mystery are the Hairto skulls, dated to around 160,000 years ago. These humans had brain cases larger than modern humans, a trait that sets them apart from other known populations. When scientists reconstructed their appearance, it was found that they looked unlike any living population, except for certain isolated groups in Ethiopia, who still share their distinctive features. This discovery calls into question the widely accepted theory that modern humans first emerged and left Africa around 70,000 years ago. Instead, Ethiopian DNA tells a different story, one of multiple exits from and returns to Africa, with populations leaving and coming back at various points in time. Ethiopia was not just the starting point of humanity's journey, it was the hub through which our ancestors continuously passed, evolving along the way. What is clear from these discoveries is that Ethiopian DNA holds the key to a much more intricate and complex human history than we had previously realized. Ethiopia was a place where multiple populations came together, where human evolution unfolded in a way that is unlike anywhere else in the world. The discoveries made from studying Ethiopian genomes are not only changing our understanding of where we come from, but also reshaping the timeline of human history itself. From the ancient Lucy to the present-day populations, Ethiopia's genetic legacy is a treasure trove of information, offering glimpses into the diverse, interconnected story of humankind. The more we learn about Ethiopian DNA, the more it becomes clear that this land is not only the birthplace of humanity, but also its ongoing narrative. Recent genetic analysis of the Gurage people has uncovered something truly remarkable. Their DNA reveals that they carry approximately 50% Eurasian ancestry, but this genetic input arrived about 3,000 years ago in a single massive wave. This corresponds to the period when the Gurage language first emerged. What makes this particularly intriguing is that the genetic influx occurred simultaneously with the appearance of the language itself. The genes and the words appear to have traveled together, preserving a migration that was invisible to archaeology. These findings suggest that genetic data can reveal migrations and historical processes that were previously unknown, adding a new layer of understanding to Ethiopia's genetic history. But the genetic story of Ethiopia doesn't end there. The Gurage people live in high-altitude regions about 3,000 meters above sea level, where oxygen levels are 40% lower than at sea level. For populations living at high altitudes, genetic adaptations are often necessary to survive in such extreme conditions. Tibetan populations, for example, took over 3,000 years to adapt to similar altitudes, developing larger lungs and an increased number of red blood cells. In Ethiopia, however, things happened differently. Ethiopian highlanders did not develop these physical adaptations in the same way. Instead, they evolved a unique solution: more efficient oxygen transfer at the cellular level. Dr. Cynthia Bio and her team discovered that the Ethiopian Highlanders carry a mutation in a gene called BHLEHE41. This gene is found nowhere else on Earth, making it an exclusive trait of these populations. This mutation appeared suddenly around 5,000 years ago and spread rapidly throughout the population. Within just 5 millennia, it went from a single individual to millions of people. This rapid genetic spread is a perfect example of natural selection working at an accelerated rate. The significance of this mutation cannot be overstated, as it allowed Ethiopians to survive in an environment that would otherwise be inhospitable for many other populations. Ethiopia's genetic anomalies also include a surprising resistance to diseases. One of the most interesting cases involves the variant of the APOL1 gene, which plays a role in protecting against sleeping sickness, a deadly disease that has made much of Africa uninhabitable. However, this protective gene comes at a cost. It increases the risk of kidney disease. Yet, in Ethiopia, this adverse effect seems to be neutralized. Ethiopians carry a second mutation that cancels out the harmful effects of the first. These two perfectly matched mutations are too perfect to be random, raising questions about how these genetic traits evolved and how they continue to impact the health of Ethiopian populations. The Beta Israel, or Ethiopian Jews, offer another perplexing genetic mystery. For over 2,000 years, the Beta Israel have claimed descent from ancient Israel. But when geneticists finally tested their DNA, they didn't find what they expected. Rather than the expected connection to modern Jewish populations, they discovered that Beta Israel's DNA is predominantly Ethiopian. However, buried within their genomes are markers that trace back to ancient Middle Eastern populations, not modern ones. These markers date back to a time before the Babylonian exile and the Roman destruction of the Jewish temple, suggesting that the Beta Israel carry the genetic legacy of an ancient form of Judaism, one that existed long before the modern Jewish diaspora. Dr. Tudor Parfit, a researcher who spent decades studying Beta Israel, made a shocking discovery. Their version of Judaism preserves practices that were abandoned elsewhere 2,000 years ago. These ancient practices include rituals and laws from the Temple era, as well as customs that archaeologists had only previously known from ancient texts. Beta Israel's genetic data supports these findings, revealing a fascinating connection to a more ancient form of Jewish identity, one that was preserved and passed down through the generations in Ethiopia. Another key finding is the low level of inbreeding in the Beta Israel population, despite their centuries-long isolation in Ethiopia. When Israeli authorities airlifted 14,000 Beta Israel in Operation Solomon, they discovered something unexpected. The Beta Israel showed far less inbreeding than would be expected from such a small and isolated population. Further investigation revealed that hidden in their DNA were traces of admixture with other Ethiopian populations, but only specific ones. These populations also carried ancient Middle Eastern genetic markers, creating a secret network of ancient bloodlines that had been preserved for 2 millennia. The religious and genetic diversity in Ethiopia itself presents another layer of complexity. Ethiopia is the only African country that was never colonized, and it is home to a unique religious history. Christianity arrived in Ethiopia in the 4th century and has survived there ever since, surrounded by Islam. This religious isolation, along with Ethiopia's geography, has allowed certain genetic markers to remain preserved within distinct religious groups. For example, Ethiopian Christian populations in the highlands carry ancient DNA lineages that have been extinct elsewhere in the world for centuries. Similarly, Muslim populations in the Harar region carry genetic signatures from medieval Arab traders frozen in time. What is most remarkable, however, is the fact that despite these religious separations, all Ethiopian populations share a common genetic signature from around 3,000 years ago. This genetic signature points to a massive admixture event that affected every corner of the country at the same time. This event coincides with the rise of the Aksumite civilization, a time when Eurasian genes were introduced into Africa on an unprecedented scale. This significant genetic shift was likely caused by trade and migration, with influences coming from distant regions such as the Arabian Peninsula and Europe. The force behind this genetic mixing was hidden in Ethiopia's ancient trade routes. For over 1,000 years, Ethiopia controlled trade routes that connected Rome, India, and the Arabian Peninsula. As incense, frankincense, and myrrh were transported across the region, they carried not only goods but also genetic material. Unlike other trade centers, Ethiopia didn't simply facilitate the exchange, it absorbed it. The genetic signatures found in Ethiopia's population reflect this long history of exchange, and they have been preserved in layers like geological strata. Each wave of traders, from the Sabaeans to the Greeks, left behind their genetic sediment, which is still visible in the modern Ethiopian genome. These genetic layers include markers from Africa, Asia, and Europe, and they are not the result of recent admixtures. They have built up over thousands of years, and each wave of migration added a new layer of genetic diversity to the population. The deepest layer dates back to 3,000 years ago, corresponding to the Sabaean migration from Yemen. These traders were not conquerors, but craftsmen and merchants who brought with them writing, architecture, and, importantly, their DNA. They didn't replace the Ethiopian populations. They merged with them, creating the genetic foundation of the Aksumite Empire. Ethiopia's location, nestled between the Blue Nile and the Red Sea, made it a prime spot for trade. But what sets Ethiopia apart is its ability to incorporate foreign influences, something that many other ancient civilizations did not. Ethiopia's cultural openness allowed it to absorb genetic material from a variety of sources, enriching its gene pool in a way that is not seen in other parts of the world. This unique cultural and genetic laboratory was further enhanced by Ethiopia's political power, which made it a focal point for migrants and traders from across the globe. Genetic evidence shows that Ethiopia was not just a passive participant in these exchanges. It actively integrated foreign genes and ideas. For instance, when Arabian merchants married Ethiopian highlanders, their children inherited a combination of high-altitude adaptations and desert survival genes. Similarly, when Greek scholars married Ethiopian nobles, their descendants carried Mediterranean disease resistance combined with African malaria immunity. Ethiopia's genetic diversity, shaped by thousands of years of mixing and adaptation, is a living record of human history and an ongoing experiment in survival and adaptation. This complex genetic history, shaped by migrations, trade, and cultural exchanges, has created a population uniquely equipped for survival. Ethiopians carry a remarkable array of genetic traits that protect against diseases like malaria, sleeping sickness, tuberculosis, and smallpox. But instead of carrying only one or two forms of disease resistance, many Ethiopians carry them all. This genetic combination makes Ethiopia's population particularly resilient to epidemics that have devastated other populations. The question now is what these genetic advantages might mean for the future of human evolution. Ethiopia's historical and genetic landscape has long been a crossroads of different civilizations, blending diverse cultures, languages, and peoples. One of the most significant ancient empires that shaped this unique genetic heritage was the Aksumite Empire. Between the 4th and 7th centuries, the Aksumites controlled trade routes that connected the Mediterranean to India, facilitating the movement of goods, people, and ideas across continents. This empire, rich in incense, gold, and other precious commodities, played a pivotal role in shaping not only Ethiopia's economy, but also its genetic makeup. The incense trade, in particular, helped Ethiopia accumulate genetic influences from distant regions. The frankincense and myrrh, traded by the Aksumites, were highly prized not only by the Romans, but also by other Mediterranean and Near Eastern cultures. As these goods traveled along the trade routes, they carried with them more than just precious commodities. They also carried genes. What sets Ethiopia apart from other trade centers of the ancient world is its ability to absorb these genetic influences rather than merely facilitate their passage. The exchange of genes in Ethiopia did not occur as a series of isolated events, but rather in multiple layers over centuries, creating a complex genetic mosaic. Researchers studying the genetic data of Ethiopian populations have uncovered traces of markers from Africa, Asia, and Europe, revealing how these genetic influences were layered in the population over time, much like geological strata. These genetic markers are not the result of recent admixtures, but have built up over thousands of years. The deepest genetic layer, dating back to about 3,000 years ago, corresponds to the arrival of the Sabaean migration, which originated from the Arabian Peninsula, specifically Yemen. The Saiyans, unlike conquerors who sought to dominate, were merchants and craftsmen who brought with them not only their expertise in writing and architecture, but also their DNA. They did not replace the Ethiopian populations, but merged with them, contributing to the foundation of the Aksumite Empire. This event was one of the earliest known waves of genetic influx into Ethiopia, and set the stage for future waves of gene flow from other distant civilizations. One of the most surprising findings from genetic studies in Ethiopia is the presence of ancient Egyptian markers in the DNA of modern Ethiopian populations. These markers appear in ancient Egyptian mummies, but not in modern Egyptians, suggesting a once deep connection between the two regions. The Blue Nile, which originates in Ethiopia and flows through Sudan to Egypt, has long been a conduit for trade and cultural exchange. The river carried more than just silt to Egypt, it carried genes. Research has shown that genetic markers from Ethiopia can be found in the royal mummies of Egypt, particularly from the 18th dynasty, which is the dynasty of the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun. What is particularly striking is that these genetic markers were found in the royal line itself, rather than in slaves or traders. This suggests that Ethiopian genes were present in Egypt's golden age, intertwining the two regions more deeply than previously believed. This connection between Ethiopia and Egypt is not limited to genetic markers. Archaeological evidence from the Nubian pyramids, which predate many of the Egyptian pyramids, also reveals architectural similarities to the obelisks of the Aksumite Empire. Modern genetic studies of Nubian populations have further illuminated the relationship between Ethiopia and Nubia. These studies found that Nubians are more closely related to Ethiopians than to other populations in Sudan. This relationship suggests that Nubia, which once spanned from Egypt to Ethiopia, was a significant bridge between the two regions, creating a shared genetic and cultural heritage that has persisted for thousands of years. Trade along the Nile was not confined to Ethiopia and Egypt. In fact, ancient trade routes spread far beyond the Nile Valley, reaching as far as India and Persia. Genetic evidence has uncovered markers in Ethiopia's population that trace back to India, Greece, and Persia, suggesting that direct maritime trade across the Indian Ocean occurred long before the rise of Islam. These markers bypassed Arabia, a significant revelation, as it was once assumed that all such exchanges passed through the Arabian Peninsula. The presence of these Indian, Greek, and Persian markers in Ethiopian populations indicates that Ethiopia was a central hub in a global network of trade long before the modern age. The genetic history of Ethiopia also reveals the enduring legacy of the Harla people, an ancient civilization that once thrived in the eastern part of the country. The Harla people built impressive stone cities, yet their fate remains a mystery. Archaeologists have uncovered their ruins, but the reason for their disappearance remains unclear. However, a breakthrough came when geneticists studied the modern-day Harari people, who live in the ancient capital of the Harla. They found that the Harari people carry the genetic legacy of the Harla, albeit mixed with unexpected markers. These markers, from Ottoman, Turkish, Portuguese, and Yemenite sources, all arrived in the region within a century of each other, suggesting that the Harla did not vanish but instead absorbed each new wave of visitors. The genetic record of the Harari people is therefore a testament to the dynamic nature of Ethiopian history, where different civilizations and peoples merged over time. This pattern of absorption and adaptation is repeated across Ethiopia. One of the most striking examples is the construction of the Lalibela rock-hewn churches in the 12th century. These churches, carved directly into the mountains, are considered one of the most impressive architectural feats in history. The construction of these churches required thousands of workers, many of whom came from different parts of the Christian world. Genetic analysis of the surrounding population has revealed the influx of DNA from Coptic Egyptians, Armenians, and even Crusader-era Europeans. This genetic diversity is a direct result of the historical significance of Ethiopia as a destination for religious pilgrims and workers from all corners of the Christian world. But Ethiopia's role as a genetic crossroads did not solely arise from external influences. The unique cultural openness of Ethiopia also played a crucial role in shaping its genetic landscape. Unlike many other ancient civilizations, which were often closed off to outsiders, Ethiopia actively embraced foreign influences. This openness is celebrated in Ethiopia's national epic, the Kebra Nagast, which recounts the legendary union between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This mythological tale of mixed heritage reflects a broader cultural acceptance of diverse bloodlines. The Kebra Nagast is not just a religious text. It also encapsulates Ethiopia's historical role as a melting pot of various civilizations. Ethiopia's strategic location at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and the Middle East made it an ideal place for the exchange of goods, ideas, and genes. However, the geographic advantages alone do not explain Ethiopia's unparalleled genetic diversity. What sets Ethiopia apart is the way its culture and political systems actively incorporated these foreign influences. This is evident in the history of the Aksumite Empire, which not only controlled the flow of goods, but also integrated the people and cultures that came through its borders. As a result, Ethiopia's genetic makeup is not the product of a single migration or event. It is the result of centuries of genetic mixing, where different populations converged, each contributing their unique traits to the Ethiopian gene pool. These genetic interactions were not random, but occurred in waves, each bringing new skills and genetic innovations that shaped the population in unique ways. This process created a genetic laboratory unlike any other in the world, one that continues to evolve today. The genetic diversity of Ethiopia is a living record of humanity's history. From the Sabaean merchants who arrived over 3,000 years ago to the Crusaders who came to build the Lalibela churches, Ethiopia has been a melting pot of different peoples and civilizations. The genetic markers left by these various groups are not just remnants of the past, they are living proof of the enduring connections between Africa, Asia, and Ethiopia's genetic history tells a story of human migration, adaptation, and survival, one that continues to unfold with each new discovery. As researchers continue to study Ethiopian DNA, they are uncovering new layers of humanity's shared past, revealing the intricate web of connections that have shaped our collective history. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic struck the world, revealing a number of unexpected patterns in the genetic data of different populations. Despite Ethiopia's limited healthcare infrastructure, some Ethiopian populations showed remarkable resistance, not to infection itself, but to the severe effects of the virus. Researchers quickly realized that this resistance could be traced back to genetic factors that were not newly acquired, but rather ancient, existing in the population long before the pandemic emerged. Dr. Ephraim Angela's research team discovered that certain Ethiopian populations carry variants in the ACE2 receptors, the molecular doorways through which the virus enters human cells. What made this discovery particularly interesting is that these variants were not new mutations but ancient ones, predating written history. It was as if Ethiopian DNA had been preparing for a viral threat for millennia. This insight opened up a fascinating new area of research into how ancient genetic traits could impact modern disease resistance. This genetic resistance to COVID-19 is not an isolated case. In fact, the Human Genome Project, completed in 2003, had initially used predominantly European DNA for its reference genome. When the project eventually sequenced African genomes properly, it was discovered that significant portions of human genetic diversity were missing from the reference genome. Much of this missing diversity was found in Ethiopia, a country that had long been overlooked in terms of genetic research. Dr. Evan Iller's team, studying Ethiopian genomes, uncovered genetic sequences entirely absent from the standard reference genome, opening the door to a better understanding of human evolution and disease resistance. These newly discovered sequences are involved in vital biological functions, such as brain development, immunity, and metabolism. This revelation suggests that Ethiopia, long considered a genetic treasure trove, could hold the key to understanding human evolution in a more nuanced way. Ethiopia's unique genetic profile doesn't just inform our understanding of disease resistance, it also holds the answers to some of the most intriguing questions in the realm of human potential. For example, Ethiopia's dominance in long-distance running is legendary. Ethiopian runners have consistently excelled in marathons, breaking world records and setting unprecedented standards. The typical explanation has been the high-altitude adaptation, which improves the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood. However, genetic research has shown that the situation is far more complex. Ethiopian athletes possess a unique combination of genetic variants that affect oxygen processing, muscle fiber composition, and energy metabolism. These genetic combinations, rather than a single super gene, seem to be the key to their exceptional endurance. It's as if the combination of small genetic advantages works together to provide a remarkable athletic capacity, one that is unique to Ethiopian populations. This genetic combinatorial effect extends beyond athletics and into many aspects of health and disease resistance. Unlike many other populations, Ethiopians have accumulated various genetic solutions to specific challenges, resulting in a population with multiple adaptations to environmental stresses. For example, Ethiopians are known to carry protective variants against malaria, sleeping sickness, tuberculosis, and even smallpox. But what makes this particularly remarkable is that rather than having one or two forms of protection, many Ethiopians possess all of these genetic advantages. This gives them an extraordinary ability to survive diseases that would be devastating for other populations. Such a wide range of protective variants makes Ethiopians more resilient, particularly in the face of epidemics that have wiped out entire populations elsewhere. Perhaps one of the most compelling aspects of Ethiopia's genetic legacy is the mystery it holds for the future of human potential. The diverse genetic traits preserved in Ethiopian populations suggest that there is more to human evolution than we currently understand. As modern science increasingly focuses on studying this genetic diversity, researchers are uncovering evolutionary paradoxes that shouldn't exist, challenging our notions of what is possible in terms of human adaptation and survival. The Ethiopian Genetic Diversity Project, launched in 2019, aims to sequence 100,000 Ethiopian genomes, more than any other African nation. Early results have already been revolutionary, with findings showing that Ethiopians carry functional variants of genes that are considered broken or inactive in other populations. These genes allow for efficient metabolism, protection against diseases like hypertension and diabetes, and increased resilience to stressors like high altitudes and extreme temperatures. One of the most intriguing aspects of this ongoing research involves the brain. Ethiopian populations show unusual variants in genes that affect neurotransmitter production. This variance correlates with lower rates of certain mental illnesses, such as depression and anxiety, while also being linked to higher rates of cognitive abilities such as pattern recognition, language acquisition, and musical ability. These findings suggest that the genetic mixing in Ethiopia has created not only physical adaptations, but also new forms of human consciousness. It raises the question of whether the unique genetic combinations found in Ethiopia could lead to the emergence of cognitive abilities that are not yet fully understood. However, with the increasing commercialization of genetic testing, the future of Ethiopia's genetic diversity is under threat. Pharmaceutical companies are already looking for disease resistance genes, while athletic programs seek performance-enhancing genetic variants. The same openness that allowed Ethiopia to become a genetic laboratory is now at risk, as the country's unique genetic makeup becomes a valuable resource in the global marketplace. The Ethiopian government has taken steps to protect its genetic heritage, enacting some of Africa's strictest genetic privacy laws. But striking the balance between enabling beneficial research and safeguarding the genetic rights of its people remains a delicate task. Ethiopia's genetic diversity isn't just a scientific curiosity, it is a resource that could benefit all of humanity. By studying Ethiopia's long history of genetic mixing and adaptation, scientists can gain insight into human potential and resilience in the face of challenges that we have yet to encounter. Ethiopia's population is a living example of human evolution in action, offering a glimpse into the future of our species. As research continues, we may find that the answers to some of our most pressing questions about human health, disease, and evolution lie in the genetic diversity of this ancient land. The question isn't just what Ethiopia's DNA can tell us about the past, it's what it can tell us about the future. Will future generations of humans carry the same genetic diversity and resilience as Ethiopians? Or will we lose the unique advantages that have made this population so exceptional? Only time will tell, but the genetic legacy of Ethiopia offers a compelling glimpse into the potential of human evolution.